Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Followers, likes, double tap. Now they control your life.
What is up, beautiful people? Welcome back to the 817 podcast, where we talk about the lovely city of Fort Worth, Texas. We hit politics, trends, business, culture, news, you name it, we discuss it. I'm here with my co-host, Ann Zeta. How goes it?
Goes pretty well. How are you today?
Good. I missed you at the Trinity Pride Fest. I thought we were going to do it 2-time. We did the Juneteenth event. I thought we were going to see each other.
Just like not having planned ahead, just run into each other. It didn't quite work out yesterday, so maybe we'll have to make some plans next time to make sure that happens. But yep, I was there too, just at a slightly different time than you.
Yeah. But it was a beautiful event, and shout out to the team at Trinity Pride for making that happen. Let's go ahead and dive in. So how this works, if you're new, I got 2 call to actions. If you're new, welcome. It's 3 short stories. 1 big story is how we operate, and then we do a win and a loss each about the city of Fort Worth or Tarrant County sometimes. And then for the people who've been listening for a hot minute, shout out for all the comments and updates. It seemed like you guys really liked the last episode with Jared and the Juneteenth discussion. And, you know, what I would love is if you've been listening for a while, but you've not ranked it or left a review, or giving us a 5 stars, I would love you to be able to do that. You know, that makes a big deal for other people in Fort Worth as a fast-growing city and people looking for news about the city as they become newbies. I think it'd be great for them to know about the 817 podcast, but in order for that to happen, more reviews, more rankings is always great. So if you can do that, that'd be awesome. So let's go ahead and dive into the short story, which is an exciting one. I remember you sending this to me via text. So let's go ahead and dive in.
So yes, our first short story is a Fort Worth Report article that Fort Worth Mayor Maddie Parker is taking a part-time chief of staff job at Cook Children's Hospital. So in the article, it basically says that Cook approached the mayor about working for the system, and she was surprised, but decided it was a great opportunity for her. It's really important for her to take a position that she says focuses on Fort Worth's community and will not be a conflict with the current job that she has of mayor. So did you have any thoughts on this article or this? We've talked a little bit about the fact that this council is a younger council, and they have expressed the fact that they need to have more balance in their lives, which I absolutely agree with. I think that that's something that all people are looking for, to not just have their jobs overtake their entire lives. And so they've worked really hard to do that. We don't pay our council and mayor at a level that allows folks, unless they're independently wealthy or retired or have someone else that is paying the bills, to rely on just the income that they get as elected officials.
And that's where like Betsy Price kind of made that stamp, where she was pretty full-time. She had nothing else having to worry about but be the mayor of the city. Right. But different time, different space. Who I think this makes a great benefit for is like a Jeanette Martinez, who, if I looked at, was getting a lot of slack for working for the Tarrant County Commissioner. That was probably the biggest thing I was getting emails on, as, you know, people wanting to fight against, you know, in that tough competition between her and Rick. So I think that gives her, a lot of people who, you know, who are Maddie's age on the city council, the grace to keep their jobs as well. I don't know how sticky people will get. I mean, the county, the cook's position probably fits more like Jared's, where it's still Fort Worth. But Jeanette's county one, I don't know, will still come under heat as she continues to be a city council member. But all in all, I am pro this, especially when you pay your mayor $29,000. I think a lot of progressives are cool with this.
Yeah, and I think the description where they talk about how we are a city manager form of government, so the elected officials aren't necessarily doing the day-to-day running of the city. So it's important to have really qualified people doing that management side of things. So I think that Mayor Parker points to the fact that we have that city manager form of government. But also Mayor Barr in this article points out that the city of Fort Worth has grown accustomed to having a mayor like Mayor Price was for the years that she was in office, which was 10 years. So someone who was very visible, seen everywhere all of the time. Yeah. So I think that this is just a situation of people getting used to things getting done in maybe a slightly different way. I don't think that it's going to inhibit the mayor from doing a good job as mayor.
Yeah. And to me, this is always like learning more about a city manager ran cities. The more I learn about that, to me, it almost feels like the city council are the attention getters and distractions to the person who's actually making all the choices. Like, I think Maddie or Jeanette gets way more heat in the press than David Cook does. So to me, I hope that a part of this leading to people being a mayor but then having a job, or city council and having a job, it also allows us to point the microscope to the right person.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more detail and minutia to get into if you want to pay total attention to what happens locally in your city and your county. And I feel that people should pay attention to those things and be interested in those things. But I also went to school and got a master's degree in those things. So that typically makes me someone who's a little more interested in all of that stuff. But I think this maybe helps people identify that they need to be interested in that stuff as well, to make sure that what policies are brought to the council to vote upon and, put into ordinance form and regulation form do often come from non-elected officials.
Yeah.
It goes the other way as well. Mm-hmm. Elected officials can go to conferences and learn about things that happen in other cities and come back and share with staff that they would like to see the city pursue some of these things. And I think our city is kind of in an evolution of being more open to ideas that come from other places. And so while I went to National League of Cities conferences over the 7 years that I served on council and came back with some ideas, not all of them were implemented. I think that having staff that are open to those things and younger council members who are interested in those things could lead us to a really good place.
Yeah. Well, I think we really hit that home, and we're going to go ahead and move into the second story. The second story is City Fort Worth website was hacked this Friday, and I first read this on the Dallas Morning News, but the City of Fort Worth announced at a press conference on Saturday that its computer system was hacked. The city said in a new release that its Information Technology Solution Department was made aware on Friday of a claim that the city website has been hacked. Data later posted online from the hack had come from an internal information system, not the city website, city staff said in a release. According to Kevin Gunn, Fort Worth IT Solutions Director, the information collected by hackers was not sensitive in nature, quote unquote, and was the type of information the city would release through Public Information Act requests, including work orders and emails between staff. The hackers gained access to the information through stolen login credentials of the city system, said Gunn, who added that the city does not know how hackers got the credentials. The attack comes 2 months after the City of Dallas website suffered a ransomware attack. If you were in a city council position, or if this was coming up, what are the first things go off in your head around this?
Well, I know when I was, working at the city, we were very intentional about training people, everybody on staff, about things, phishing and hack possibilities. We had to do that recertification every year to be able to identify things that might be fishy that we should stay away from and that sort of thing. When I read this, I immediately recognized that this was probably the My Fort Worth app, which I'm very familiar with. It's, he mentions that it's where people can report a pothole to get fixed. And I think these hackers might have found out that I might be a top user of this website. So hopefully there's my information is on there, but I don't think they're saying that they were able to get that.
And it looks like the data was mainly stuff like that, right? Like the public information around
the databases that show what things they need to go out and fix, and the emails between departments about getting those things fixed.
Which, sidebar, the My Fort Worth app is pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think it's very helpful. I mean, we can't, if we had enough city staff to track all these things and keep up with all these things, we would have to have way higher taxes than we have right now, just being honest. And so it's really important that we let the city know of things that we see out in the community. I went on a walking tour of the near South Side development projects earlier this last week, or the end of last week, and I reported like 3 things while we were just walking around. People parking in bike lanes was one of the things I reported. Some storm drains that had screens on them that hadn't been kept clear, and so they were backed up, and some of that stuff gets left after a development project, and that annoys me. So I reported
what I love about the My Fort Worth app too, though, I actually started reading it before our podcast because it has a rolling trend of
You can see what other people have
post.
reported.
Yeah, and that's hecka cool.
Yeah,
like
and
the
it's mapped.
contributor.
You can look at it on a map form too, so you can see the stuff near you.
That's like super cool. So if you haven't downloaded the Fort Worth My Fort Worth app, we're going to put it in the show notes as well.
And I think there was one other aspect of this that I thought was interesting. They said that the group claiming responsibility for the hack said in a Facebook post that they decided to make this message towards the U.S. government, and it just happens to be one that Texas is one of the largest states banning gender-affirming care, and that's why they are targeting Texas. So that was just another interesting element of who purports to have hacked.
Yeah, so that's yeah, you know, I'm loving that Robin Hood energy, kind of, you know, take him down if that's the case. Well, okay, well, let's. I mean, there's nothing else to really say about this. I just think as Fort Worthians who communicate with our city, it's probably good to know that the system is being hacked. But today it seems like an updated story that happened over the weekend.
Yeah, hopefully they've taken care of that. And I haven't gone to check and see if there's anything fishy, but I used it on, I think it was Thursday afternoon. So if it happened on Saturday, maybe I need to take a look. I think they're making us all log back in and put in new passwords.
Got it. All righty, so let's move to the third story, which I'm excited to get your takes here. But the $2.6 billion I-35 tollway opens in North Fort Worth after 3 years of construction. There was a ribbon cutting ceremony about the new I-35 West to help support North Fort Worth and getting people to work or to downtown faster. Betsy Price was someone who was super excited about this project. There was public and private partnership. That to me was the coolest part of the story, is how everyone had to play together between North Tarrant Expressway Mobility Partners, Hillwood at Alliance, and to finance this $2.1 billion. It was just, to me, that was really interesting.
Yeah, I think there's a lack of funding for these types of things. And what this region has done is allowed some of those express lanes and toll lanes to finance the entire construction. So it pays for the free lanes as well as the tolled lanes, and then they are able to make the money back on those tolled elements of the project. So from my understanding, some of these projects would not happen at all if it weren't for that public-private partnership. I know people get really bent out of shape about toll lanes, but there are always free lane elements to these developments, so it's not just tolled lanes. And you have a choice between taking those and taking the others. But I know that there are very strong opinions about those toll lanes. My biggest takeaway from this was the headline reads that driving in far north Fort Worth just got quicker with the opening of new toll road projects. And for those of you who obsess about roads and things as much as I do and kind of support public transportation as much as I do, you are probably aware that widening roads and adding more lanes does not necessarily result in less congestion or faster times getting from here to there, because it induces more people to drive, and those spaces quickly fill up with more people driving. But I know that our public transportation organization look at these as possibilities for putting public transportation on these express lanes, and having that kind of service on those lanes would enable them to get to these places with public transportation. So if we add that element in there and actually allow that to happen, I can see some positives come out of it. But just adding more lanes, I have a favorite little video that people send to me all the time because they think I haven't seen it already, where they say one more lane, just one more lane and it'll fix congestion, one more lane and it'll fix congestion. And at the end it says, you know what will really fix congestion? And it says trains really, really loud. So
what was like the part that was interesting, like I don't know where this data is from, but Glenn Whitley said we're one of 5 areas out of 100 in the country where congestion has not gotten ahead of growth. That's because we had people who were willing to commit, I guess, to a project like this.
I mean, with the amount of people that have moved to the Metroplex, to this whole region over the last however many years, congestion levels have stayed relatively constant.
Yeah.
And that is because of these public-private partnerships where these roads
Yeah.
have been able to be expanded in the way that they have. I don't think it's possible to continue to do this with the growth that is going to continue because you can't continue to add lanes. I mean, even the people who are celebrating this completion have said publicly that you cannot pave your way to alleviating congestion. There's going to have to be a combination of other modes of transportation, not everybody driving in their cars. And then somebody asked that question the other day of people who claim that congestion hasn't gotten worse, because anecdotally, individually, each of us have run into congestion where we
Yep.
think, oh my gosh, it takes us so much longer to get from here to there, and it used to take less time. But I think over the entire region, that is the case.
Yeah.
That data is correct that over the entire region, those congestion levels have stayed relatively consistent. But I think there are some areas that's probably not the case.
Yeah. The Texas Press toll lane will be 7.2 miles of fresh asphalt. They also mentioned that nearly 300,000 vehicle motors between downtown and Eagle Parkway cross daily. To me, what this also doesn't solve is, to me, like the people who I hear talking about the traffic up here, it's their neighborhoods and it's their developments that they're lived in that has like one road and a stop sign and
right.
and it's just
a lot
one
of
by
those
one.
are still, I think, farm to market roads, county roads, and they don't have as much east-west connectivity.
Yeah.
And some of those roads are still bar ditch, and so when things back up, when you have huge subdivisions being built, and then everybody getting in their car to get in and out of that subdivision each day and get to that school that's
Yeah.
just down the road, and it's a 2-lane road. So the highway being better doesn't help within
Yeah.
the neighborhoods in those areas for sure.
And what I want to get your take on, this is kind of a bonus added to this short story area, just kind of talking about how we build cities outside of the dense part of the core.
Yeah, like how development happens in more far-flung places.
Yeah.
Leads us to another article that you shared with me that on the agenda is over 1,400 acres in play for a potential residential development. And you have access to this whole thing because I guess
Yep.
you subscribe and I don't. But it basically talks about a developer plans to bring a large lot residential subdivision to the property. And this area is in the city of Fort Worth's ETJ in Parker County. And so I do have strong opinions about this. I think we definitely have so many people moving here and people are constantly looking for housing. So adding more housing is something that's important. But when we add housing in the ETJ, which is the extraterritorial jurisdiction of the city, that's an area that we don't currently provide infrastructure. So there's not water, sewer, robust roads built in that area. And if the city doesn't have plans to put that infrastructure in, then it's up to those individual developments to do it. And they do that through what are called municipal utility districts, MUDs. And that can just kind of lead to more people living out in those areas that far north Fort Worth is experiencing. This, where we're talking about here, is far west Fort Worth. But in far north, all those subdivisions got built. And then all those people are upset about not being able to get from here to there. And the same thing could happen if we continue to incentivize development such as this. In the body of the article, I think it talks about that they plan to have commercial and school available. That's similar to kind of the Walsh Ranch development that has a variety of housing types, commercial, schools, and things. And so if it's done in a right way, it could be a livable, walkable development that allows people to do all of that within a 15-minute radius of their homes and not have to all get into the cars and get onto roads that are under capacity to be able to accommodate all of them. So it could be beneficial in the long run, but I think the way we've seen it done up to this point is subdivisions that are kind of curvilinear, cul-de-sac streets with walls around them, and it takes multiple amount of time to get out of your neighborhood, and then you get onto a road that then takes you to a commercial development that is very car centric with drive-throughs and other things. So
Yeah, and it's what I didn't like about the article, the Fort Worth Report article about it, is it made it just sound like everything great and innovative happening for Fort Worth is outside of the city. Even I think Betsy had a comment around, there's so much around us happening that's important for us to get to. And I also think what we're talking about is going to be even more heightened just with this whole work from home energy, and just like people needing now an extra room for their office if they're like going to work from home. I saw some crazy data on the Wall Street Journal, which I'll add, and we don't have really time to talk about, but office buildings are only about 50% as full as they were before COVID-19. They look at passenger trips on public transit monthly are still down. They're talking about even just the little nuances of 3 days a week in the office or 2 days a week, what that impacts to the local economy downtown. I don't know. I was at a meeting looking at the skyline of Fort Worth, and it was me and a couple other people, and I was like, what percentage of our office space do you think is empty right now? And people were yelling 30%, 50%. And so the Wall Street Journal article was just talking about, what do you do in a world where our city gets funded by taxes by people getting office spaces, but yet now a lot of places are going to start not having office spaces because most people are going to work from home. I don't know. It seems like this pivot's happening where a lot of people are choosing to live in this sprawl and then deal with those travel consequences when they have to come to the office or come to the city. But then you're also seeing our city having to deal with maybe these large corporations not investing in office space because of the sprawl and because of the distance, and now work from home is more common. I don't know. I'm interested to see how Fort Worth might be a place where, Betsy's right, that more of the good energy of Fort Worth is happening in Alliance. More of the jobs are happening outside of the loop. More of the people are living way far away from the true city. And you look at McKinney building an airport. It's this. I wonder what this looks like. Texas could be most in trouble to suburbs versus the inner core than like a lot of other places.
Yeah, I think we're going to settle into some combination of this. Not everybody working from home, not everybody going into the office. Yeah. I think that COVID showed us that we could do both, but I think that collaboration that happens when you're actually physically with people is something that people are starting to miss. And so having a flexible schedule where not everybody is going into the office 9 to 5, where you have those huge commuter times that cause massive congestion, could actually shake out to be a beneficial thing. And I think that, to your point about how much of downtown's office is currently vacant, I would want to go and actually find that out. And I think downtown Fort Worth Inc. probably has those numbers. And I think it's not as bad as some other
it's like
cities.
27. I remember seeing it. I remember them dropping something. It's not near as bad as the San Franciscos and the larger areas.
And I think that they've done a lot of conversion of some of the office buildings to hotels and some to residential, and most of the new development recently has been more in that residential vein. So then you would have people living there, and there would be public places and places for them to come together and do that collaboration piece. You're not out in the hinterlands in a subdivision all by yourself, far, far away and physically separated, and a hard commute to get to the people that you need to collaborate with.
And that's the part that, as we move the downtowns to be more residential, but there's also just this weird, we still want this like extreme demand pricing, but it just feels like, I don't know, it just feels like we're not letting go of the actual price of offices today, of real estate today, especially in the commercial space, especially if you're now going, I don't know, it just seems like we still want the same price pre-pandemic, and that is something that
is going to have to level out and settle in too.
Yeah, I mean, on this article, it talked about downtown cell phone activity as a percentage of pre-COVID levels. San Francisco's at 30%, and Austin's at 52% of activity, cell phone activity. So, I mean, it's a cool example of like how many people are hustling, bustling downtown compared to the pandemic. But yeah, no, I think this is a good story, and I think these are topics that we will continue to hit back on, is how do we develop North Fort Worth, the Alliance area, and Bridget. I think this goes back to what we're excited about, the big story. This is an example of downtown development, using a lot of the ecosystem to bring people closer together.
The big story that we had was a Fort Worth Star-Telegram article entitled "So Much Momentum in Fort Worth, A&M Breaks Ground with Big News of Business Partners." So at least 3 major companies will have a significant presence in downtown as part of the Texas A&M Fort Worth. And those are Lockheed Martin, Ilbit Systems of America, and Alcon. So they are looking at a $150 million 8-story building that will be the first of 3 planned for the project. The Law and Education building will house Texas A&M Law School and courses in engineering, healthcare, nursing, and other subjects offered by Texas A&M. And the campus will be along Commerce Street across from the Fort Worth Water Gardens near the convention center. And what they did not mention is also near the central station, where there is a robust hub of multimodal transit with TexRail and the TRE and all of the buses for Fort Worth, as well as Greyhound and possibly high-speed rail at some point. This is something that we have talked about, bringing high-speed rail there as well. So experts have said that the downtown project could be the most significant economic development in the city in 100 years and could mark a major tipping point for downtown. So it kind of goes into what we were talking about, like what is going to be happening downtown. And this portion of downtown has been a strip of surface parking for many, many years. And many of my urban-minded friends have done mapping that show all of the surface parking lots. And this is a whole strip of surface parking lots that separated the central station from the rest of downtown. And during the construction of a high-rise residential development on 9th Street, there has been a very big separation from that. But once all of that is complete, I think with this development coming, as long as they treat the streetscape and the street level part of this development in a pedestrian friendly way, this could be a really excellent energizer to a side of downtown that has had less energy than some of the other parts of downtown.
Yeah, it's truly as much as it's truly going to be remarkable, and how fast it's going. I mean, this is our best bet. I mean, this to me is all the things to be excited for. The Panther Island, the Alliance. This just seems. I mean, John Goff is doing an outstanding job accelerating. He talks about meeting with different companies every single day. He's like, we've spoken to hundreds of companies.
John Goff, chairman of the Fort Worth Tarrant County Innovation Partnership, has played a lead role in engaging with companies that could partner with the Fort Worth campus. Goff, who owns Crescent Real Estate, has been the driving force behind the project after former Mayor Betsy Price approached him in ways to help the city recover from the pandemic.
Yeah, and so like that part right there is like he just talks about the involvement of Alcon, the largest eye care device company. I mean, I didn't know this, but it's U.S. headquarters in Fort Worth, and it's expected to generate more than $9 billion in net sales this year. And he just talks about how many. He's like, I'm not exaggerating. I bet we've had over 100 meetings in my office, he said. It's kind of been control center for all these meetings between A&M and companies. And that to me is just, when you can add a university like Texas A&M and that brand, plus a billionaire investor like Goff, who and then with Betsy Price, I mean, this is probably Betsy's, of all the things she might say she accomplished, like this one might be like just the true golden goose, the thing that makes that really accelerates us. And it's going to be interesting what that population looks like when you look at. I think what my fear of this all is that you're not going to find this talent locally to fund and fill these positions. When you look at higher education and graduate schools today, a great example, I just did a speech at the Texas Education Agency. 79% of computer science graduate students in our higher education system comes from overseas. So if that stays true and that stays strong, then what does that look like for how this area develops, the type of communities and cultures that come into Fort Worth? Will those feel welcoming? Will they enjoy their time here in Fort Worth? Those are all the different narratives and things that I'm excited to see from this. It's going to bring in a different melting pot of people. I always say, when you want to really look at the innovations in our country, look at areas that has a high Asian or specifically Indian Asian population. Frisco, for example, has 16% of their population Indian American, where Fort Worth is 1.1%. So you want to find where these electrical engineers, these computer scientists, where they go study and then what professions they go take. And it seems like Fort Worth is going to accelerate in that space. I just don't know what that looks like for our traditional high school kids today, our domestic students who grew up here, the families. How do we help bridge the gap from all this opportunity that's literally going to be down the street from them, from Terrell, from Terrell Academy, where we were just at, to right under that bridge is where all this economic possibility is going to be. So how do we build that for our kids?
Well, and I think there's she's not mentioned in the article, but in one of the photographs in the article, I see the chancellor of TCC. And I know that their student body is more diverse. And so encouraging that partnership, which clearly is happening. And then in University of Texas at Arlington, I know that their student body is a broader diversity as well. So it's basically making sure that the students who are coming up through Fort Worth ISD and the schools here in Fort Worth have access to those institutions of higher learning so that they can be the people who are prepared for these jobs. So there's going to have to be some intentionality around it, or like you said, it's going to be bringing people in from other places, and it's not going to be a thing that is for the people who are currently here.
Someone who was at the event said to me, and I think you would appreciate this, when Tim O'Hare spoke, he took the work, live, play line, and he said work, live, worship. So he...
Well, there's quite a few churches in downtown Fort Worth, so I think we can do all of those things in an area like downtown.
There's a huge one there. I mean, that one they built, I think that church right off of like White Settlement Bridge, like going down.
I think it's on Henderson.
Yeah, Henderson, yes. That, you want to know what's been built faster than Texas A&M? That church. That thing was flying. Like, it's so crazy. But let's go ahead and go to wins and losses.
Every loss that I identify is an attempt to turn it into a win, but I won't talk about that except for to say that I think that our focus on highway expansion and development in our ETJ, which could possibly exacerbate sprawl, which is something that just adds more cost and, difficulty to serving a city, is something that I think we need to get away from. So I think an opportunity to remind folks that just expanding highways and developing further and further out is not something that I think is going to be beneficial. And I think that there was another article I sent you that we didn't talk about that talked about some communities are banning drive-throughs because all these areas are being developed in such a car-centric way that the idea that I pointed out when we were talking about the sprawl and how it could have elements to alleviate everybody having to get into their car, if you have those elements within those places, is not going to happen if we always just focus on everybody being able to do everything out the window of their car. So if you have a drive-through and you can't walk to that establishment, everybody's going to drive their cars to it. If you develop subdivisions and out in the middle of nowhere with big walls around them and it takes, multiple minutes to get out of your neighborhood, that's not going to induce people to walk to the things. Yeah. So I think those are my losses. I think we continue to incentivize development that keeps us from putting funding and infrastructure behind other ways, which I think are more sustainable.
Yeah. And when we were preparing for the comments, we were talking about, and I don't know if you hit this when we were talking about the Dallas Business Journal article about the new development acres that they're potentially residential development. But you talked about how like the city said they were going to stop annexing.
Yeah, so years ago, the city decided not to do any involuntary annexation. So I thought we were going to get away from continuing to annex because Fort Worth is huge when it comes to square miles. We're very large compared to most cities of even our population. And so we were getting away from that, continuing to annex. And then come to find out they weren't going to not annex if a property owner approached the city to ask to be annexed. So it was just involuntary annexation that we were going to stop doing. But if a developer came to us and said they wanted to be annexed into the city, we would very much consider that and continue to do so. And I think it seems, I don't know if this property, it doesn't say in the article, I don't think, whether or not they want to be annexed into the city or not. Yep. But the city has plans about where they're going to run water and sewer and where they're going to build roads. And if we keep acquiescing to somebody who just decides they want to build on their land and then ask the city to extend their water and sewer and streets, when we have all these other water, sewer, and streets that need to be maintained, it's not a gift from a developer when they hand those things over to the city and say, here you go, we've built all this for you, because then it has to be maintained. And so that just goes on the minus side of the docket of
Yeah.
what we have to budget for.
Yeah, and then so when we talk about how that has impact historically, sprawl, an example we talked about is the Starbucks in District 6, and like an example of...
I think we had some zoning in place that would be like mixed use development
Yeah.
that would incentivize that walkability. But oftentimes somebody coming in and wanting to plunk down their prototype has been less walkable. And so I have started to notice that Starbucks in specific
Yep.
are building these very small buildings that are no longer third places for people to gather because their inside seating area is very, very small, and they are just relying on the drive-through business. And so if you see these, even if they're like really close to a single family subdivision, that if somebody had the druthers to walk out of and walk to it, they still have to walk across a drive-through lane to get into the building, and then there's not very much space inside. So I've started looking at aerial photographs of more recent Starbucks, and it's literally a little rectangular building with a drive-through around it and surface parking next to it. And that's not a really walkable model. And so I think Starbucks, they say in the article that they are trying to develop a prototype that is right for the various areas in which they're developing. But I think these sprawled areas deserve to have walkability too.
Yeah.
And so if we don't require them to build it in the way that allows that other modes of transit to get there and for people to walk there, then they're going to just continue to have the struggles with everybody getting in their cars.
My loss is just the overall homicide numbers and the homicides on the east side of Fort Worth. We have already, starting summer, had a 12-year-old boy killed Monday night at a shopping center on Brentwood Stair. We had a 19-year-old man who was found dead with several gunshot wounds on Tuesday in Women Drive, and 4 people who were shot, one fatally in a gunfight Wednesday in an apartment complex on Hanley Drive. These are all east side Fort Worth areas, and also the big kicker here is we know that the summer leads to kids having more time, and then this type of we always see these kind of things hit up over the summer months. And I think what is tough is that Parker or the police will say, hey, we have a 13% decrease in violent crime since 2022, but there's data that shows that the annual homicide toll in Fort Worth has been over 100 over the past 3 years. And it hasn't been that since 1995. And so I just think the loss here is, we are not doing enough programming and community support to prevent kids and just young people getting in spaces and troubles that they shouldn't be getting into.
Yeah. East Fort Worth was the place that my husband and I lived when we very first moved to Fort Worth. We lived off of East Chase, and Hanley was the place that I had my very first job out of grad school. And so I think that this does highlight some of the areas that have been underserved for a very long time and don't maybe have the infrastructure necessary to. But summertime, like you said, is definitely a time when we need to make sure that we have places for kids to be, and hopefully can alleviate some of these things from happening, because they're truly tragic and truly sad for the community, for the entire community, not just the specific community in which they're happening.
Yeah. And my big thing at the end of the day is, like, if we're going to harp good news around the crime, or if this was Fort Worth ISD's test scores, it'd be on the front of the paper. And I think if we're going to press teachers, we got to press the thing that we actually give most money to, and also show that their grades are poor as well.
Well, and I think speaking to funding, the CCPD grants are open right now. So if there are people in the community that have ideas that we could fund that would help alleviate or address crime in our communities, that funding cycle is open right as we speak. So maybe we can put in the show notes places where people could go and check out what the qualifications are, and if they have some ideas of things that they could fund that would be helpful in that area.
I love it. What is your win?
My win is the fact that on Saturday, which was yesterday as we record, but the Saturday before the Monday, which you all are listening to us, Trinity Pride had an incredibly successful Pride Festival. And as you mentioned earlier, we both were there, but we didn't see each other. It was incredibly hot, and I thought to myself, oh, it's going to be so hot. People are not going to come out. But having served on a committee to help put this together very minorly, I cannot take credit. There were a lot of much harder working people than me. I was just so impressed with the turnout, the amount of young people that were just there in each other's presence and feeling safe and welcome, and just the overall vibe of it. And it makes me not want to wait until just one time every single June to do this. And I know there are people working in the community to have other touch points and places where people can come together and support each other in that community. So
yeah, it was great. And honestly, by the time I showed up around 8, it was the weather was getting a lot better. They had the wobble on, so people were out there shaking some tail. The lines were long at the food spot. I mean, the Carpenter's Cafe was backed up. One of my favorite trucks, Compatible Delights, they were backed up. So it was people were also supporting with their money. The booths. My wife grabbed a couple different things. It was just cool to see all together. I mean, and it just the diversity from age, from ethnicity. And you're right. Things about Fort Worth is like we get these joys once in a blue moon, and that's what makes us feel smaller than the other big cities where there's community, right? I think about like how powerful to have that serendipity bumping into the community of what Trinity Pride over and over again.
Yes.
And even Jared talked about, man, we have 200,000 African Americans who live in Fort Worth, but that can we don't live in a city that's dense enough that allows that energy that we have to chase for on Juneteenth.
Yeah.
Like that's another great example. So it's interesting, our discussion from sprawl and people going away, but then also just like all this magic that's happening that we just can't seem to curate a stew that happens regularly every day all the time.
But I think Trinity Pride is working towards that. So I think that the resources
awesome.
that were there with the market to support businesses, and then the resources, there were booths with resources as well. All of those things will continue to be available on their website. And I think, like I said, there's people working towards having times to come together, not just in June.
Yeah. So my win is, hey, I believe this. I saw this out, and what's cool is this Shaquille O'Neal to launch a musical festival in Fort Worth. I believe tickets are going on sale here around the corner. It's $50 to go. If you don't know this, Shaq has a DJ career, and he quotes in the article saying that DJing music festivals is closest to feeling like playing in the NBA Finals that he's ever had. This is why he loves it so much. But the lineup that he has is really cool too. I mean, there's just some strong DJs he have set out to go with him. This is going to be at Panther Island Pavilion. This is going to be a 2-stage show. At the end of the day, I'm pro festival and finding ways to make more annual festivals in our city. I think that's something that you showcase, like what happened to Austin is Austin had South by ACL before they had emerging companies, and it's because people started attending these events, hanging out with their friends. Hey, I'll go hang out with you in Austin for the weekend. We can go see our favorite so-and-so. And then they fall in love with, wow, this is a cool place. This is a cool time. I had a time of my life. And I think like Austin is an example of how festivals can lead to elevation of wowness about people talking about your city across the country or even the world. And so I think this is another win to have DJ Diesel is Shaq's DJ's name, doing another event that I think is unique. And I didn't know he lived in Carrollton, but he has a house there, 5,000 square feet.
That either.
And he says he spends a lot of time in Texas.
There you go.
You never know who's walking around in your local Whole Foods,
Yeah. Now with social media, though, people tend to tell you when they see them or take pictures of them and share, and everybody's like, "Oh, so and so is at this place."
Maybe they can add that to the My Fort Worth app. Put it as a section.
Where you can report those things and share.
Alrighty, well, beautiful people, we just gave you a nice, crispy, under 50-minute episode. It's been a while since we did that, so hopefully you can enjoy yourself. And we'll see you next time.
All right, see you next week. Thanks.